Please like, follow and subscribe my YouTube channel. My name is Hannah Carter. I'm 36 years old. And by the time most women my age were building careers, falling in love, or learning how to live for themselves, I had already spent half my life making sure my little brother never felt how hard the world could be. I didn't come to his wedding expecting applause. I didn't need gratitude wrapped in gold paper and pretty speeches. I came because I had earned my seat in that room the hard way. I came as the woman who worked double shifts, skipped college, pawned her jewelry, and lied about being fine so a scared little boy could grow into a man with a future. So when I stepped into that elegant reception hall, wearing the best dress I could afford and carrying more pride than anyone there could possibly understand, I truly believed I was coming to witness one of the happiest moments of my life. Then I found my seat. The place card was ivory, hand-lettered, and expensive enough to look delicate. It sat in front of a crystal glass and polished silverware like it belonged there. I picked it up with a smile already forming on my face. Then I read it. Poor, uneducated sister, my brother's freeloader. For one full second the room disappeared. Then the laughter started. Not shocked laughter, not nervous laughter, comfortable laughter. The kind of laughter people share when they believe they're safe being cruel. My fingers went cold around the card. My throat burned. I wanted to put it down, straighten my back, and leave with whatever dignity I had left. But before I could take a step, my brother caught my wrist, stood up so fast his chair scraped across the floor, and said in a voice that silenced half the room, "Whoever thought humiliating my sister today was funny is about to learn how expensive disrespect can be. Before I tell you what happened next and why the next morning changed everything, tell me what time is it where you are and where are you watching from? I want to know how far this story has reached before I take you any further." The laughter died so abruptly it felt like the entire room had been slapped. My brother was still holding my hand, and for the first time since I had entered that ballroom, I wasn't the embarrassed poor relative standing under rich people's judgment. I was the reason the groom had stopped his own wedding reception cold. Heads turned, forks hovered over plates. The string quartet, tucked in the corner like decoration, had quietly gone still. And across the room, the bride's father slowly rose from his chair with the offended calm of a man who had spent his entire life believing money made him untouchable. That was when I first heard his name spoken aloud by someone at the next table, Mark Whitmore. He didn't rush. Men like him never do. He adjusted the cuff of his jacket, smoothed the front of it, then looked at me the way people look at a stain they think someone else should remove. "Jake," he said, almost amused, "sit down before you embarrass yourself even more." So that was the second name the room gave me that night. Jake, my little brother, the boy I had raised, the groom whose face had gone hard in a way I had only seen twice in my life. Once when our landlord tried to throw us out in the rain, and once when a teacher mocked my thrift store shoes in front of him when he was 12. "No," Jake said, "you're going to explain why my sister's seat card says Freeloader." A few people shifted uncomfortably, but Mark didn't. He even smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "Oh, don't be dramatic. It was a joke. Surely she's used to surviving worse than a joke." That line got a few ugly chuckles from people who had recovered just enough courage to be cruel again. My stomach clenched, but I kept my chin up. I wasn't going to cry for them, not one tear. A woman in pale silk standing near the sweetheart table whispered, "This is exactly why class matters." I recognized her as the bride's mother before anyone said her name. Patricia, pearls at her throat, ice in her eyes. Jake took one step forward. "Say another word about my sister," he said quietly. "And I promise you this day stops being about your daughter's wedding and starts being about what kind of man you really are." That finally put a crack in the room. Not because everyone suddenly found their conscience, but because they sensed risk. Rich people can tolerate cruelty. What they fear is exposure. Mark's expression sharpened. "Young man, everything you have now exists because my daughter chose you, because my family opened doors for you. That woman," he pointed at me without even pretending respect, "didn't build you. She held on to you. I felt Jake's fingers tighten around mine. Then he said, "Louder this time. My sister fed me before she fed herself. She worked nights so I could finish school. She sold the only necklace our mother left her so I could buy textbooks. If you think that makes her a freeloader, then your definition of value is rotten." The silence that followed was different, heavier, more dangerous. Mark glanced toward the back of the room and I followed his eyes just in time to see him lift his phone, not to call security, not yet. He was calmer than that, smarter than that, he murmured to someone on the other end, his gaze never leaving Jake. "I want the prenup attorney on standby," he said, and put a hold on the transfer we discussed. Immediately, Jake heard him. I heard him. And in that instant, the shape of the real threat became clear. This wasn't about one insulting card anymore. This was a man announcing that because his pride had been challenged, he was willing to use his money to punish the future. Jake looked at him without blinking. "Thank you," he said. Mark frowned. "For what?" Jake's voice dropped into something almost frighteningly steady. "For proving who you are in front of everyone. If a wealthy man could erase your tomorrow with one phone call, what would you do? Walk away and save yourself, or stay and make him regret ever trying?" The bride had been silent until then. Beautiful, frozen, and pale under the expensive reception lights. She had looked like someone standing between two worlds and trusting neither one not to collapse. When she finally moved, it wasn't toward her father. It was toward Jake. "Stop," she whispered. But the word cracked in the middle, as though it had split under the pressure of all the things she had never said out loud. That was when I learned her name not from gossip, but from Jake's mouth. "Emily," he said softly, still staring at her father. "You need to decide whether this is a wedding or a warning." The room seemed to inhale. Emily Whitmore was not what I had expected when I first met her months earlier. She had the polish of wealth, yes, but not its worst habits. I had seen uncertainty in her from the beginning, the kind that comes from loving someone your family approves of on paper, but not in truth. She loved Jake's potential. Her father loved the idea of owning part of it. And in that ballroom, with the place cards still in my hand like evidence, Emily looked at me as if she suddenly understood that marrying the man she loved meant finally facing the kind of family she had been born into. Mark's voice sharpened. "Emily, come here." She didn't move. Patricia stepped in, smiling. That brittle society smile meant to disguise panic. "Sweetheart, your father is trying to contain an ugly scene. Don't make this harder." Emily swallowed. Then she looked at me again, and what crossed her face was not pity. It was shame. Deep, unmistakable shame. "Did you know?" I asked her because I needed the truth more than I needed comfort. Her eyes filled immediately. "No," she said. "I swear to you I didn't know. That should have been enough to soften me. But humiliation has a long echo, and I had spent too many years surviving by distrusting easy tears." Before I could answer, Jake spoke. "Then prove it." Emily flinched like he had struck her. Mark took a step forward. "That's enough. She owes none of you a test." Jake finally let go of my hand and squared himself to the room. "No," he said. "Actually, everyone in here owes my sister an answer, because all of you laughed before you knew whether she'd survive it." And then the scene shifted in my mind with the strange clarity trauma sometimes gives you. I saw my brother at 8, sitting at our chipped kitchen table fighting a fever, while I pressed cool towels to his forehead before heading to my night shift. I saw him at 14, too proud to admit he needed money for a school trip, pretending he didn't care while I picked up an extra weekend cleaning off his bathrooms. I saw him at 17 standing in our apartment doorway with a scholarship letter in one hand and tears in his eyes because he knew exactly what it had cost me to get him there. Emily's voice broke through my thoughts. "I know what she did for you," she said. Mark laughed once, cruel and dismissive. "You know the sentimental version." Emily turned to him so fast even he looked startled. "No," she said, and this time there was steel in her voice. "I know the real version. Jake told me how she raised him, how she became more parent than sister, how she buried her own future to protect his. And you put Freeloader on her place card." Patricia tried to intervene. Emily, not now. When then? Emily shot back. After we cut the cake. After we toast the people who humiliated the woman who kept your future son-in-law alive. Some guests looked away. Others watched more closely, sensing the balance of power shift for the first time. Mark's face hardened in a way I realized had probably terrified boardrooms for 30 years. Be careful, he told his daughter. You are emotional right now. Emily gave a short, disbelieving laugh. No, Dad. I'm awake. That landed. You could feel it. Not because it was loud, but because it pierced his image of himself. Men like Mark expect defiance from outsiders. They never expect it from the daughter they raised to obey beautifully. Jake looked at Emily with pain, hope, and disbelief all at once. Did you know your father planned to control our accounts after the wedding? Emily's head snapped toward Mark. He didn't answer. That was answer. Dad, she said again, quieter this time. Mark finally spoke, but the confidence had thinned. It was a legal precaution. Emily stared at him as if some private illusion had just died. You were going to start our marriage with surveillance and punishment. Mark's jaw tightened. I was going to protect you from what? She demanded. Love, loyalty, a man who defends his sister. That question rolled through the room like a thrown blade. I could feel the crowd changing, not morally, not all at once, but strategically. People begin to pull back from cruelty the moment it stops looking powerful. I stepped forward then because for all Jake's courage and Emily's shock, this was still my humiliation, and I would not vanish inside it. Mr. Whitmore, I said, I don't need your approval. I never came here asking for your money, your status, or your blessing. I came because my brother asked me to stand beside him on the most important day of his life. And if the only way your family knows how to welcome me is with a public insult, then whatever empire you built clearly failed where it mattered most. Mark looked at me with open contempt. You think a speech makes you equal? No, I said. I think character does. Emily's eyes filled, but she didn't look away. Jake reached for her hand this time, and after one terrible second of hesitation, she let him take it. That was the moment the wedding stopped being a performance and became a battle line. Mark did not shout immediately. That would have made him look emotional, and he was too practiced for that. Instead, he smiled the way a predator smiles when it has decided patience will hurt more than force. Very moving, he said. Truly, the hard-working sister, the loyal brother, the awakened bride. If this were a movie, I suppose the audience would clap. No one did. He turned to Jake. But this is not a movie. This is the real world. And in the real world, people like me determine whether people like you rise or remain what they were born into. Jake didn't flinch. I'd rather stay honest at the bottom than rotten at the top. Mark nodded slowly, almost impressed. And there it is. Pride dressed up as virtue. You think suffering makes you noble. It doesn't. It just makes you resentful. I had heard versions of that sentence my whole life from people who had never skipped meals, never hidden overdue bills, never smiled through exhaustion so a younger sibling wouldn't panic. They always wanted poverty to be either romantic or shameful, never dignified. Jake stepped toward him again, but I touched his arm. He stopped. I knew that look in Mark's eyes now. He had moved past insult. He was calculating punishment, and I was right. He lifted his phone once more, this time making no effort to hide it. Charles, he said when the call connected, pull the junior analyst offer from Carter. Effective immediately, and inform Hensley Development that if they move forward with him after tonight, our investment discussion is over. Emily gasped. Dad, what are you doing? He covered the phone for only a second, teaching him scale. Then he returned to the call. Also cancel the foundation grant review for the Sisters Neighborhood Literacy Project. I don't reward theatrics. My blood went cold. Very few people in that room knew that for the last 2 years, in addition to my day job, I had been trying to launch a small literacy center in our neighborhood for kids who were growing up the way Jake and I had. I had applied for 3 grants. One of them apparently had passed across one of Mark's invisible desks. He knew. Somehow he knew. Jake lunged before I could stop him, but two groomsmen caught his arms. "You don't get to touch him," one hissed. Not because he cared about Mark, but because rich weddings train people to protect the host before the truth. "Let go of me," Jake said through clenched teeth. Emily stepped directly in front of her father. "Hang up." Mark looked at her as if she were a child interrupting a business call. "Move!" She didn't. "Hang up, or I walk out of this wedding and I never come back." The room went electric. Patricia turned white. "Emily, don't say things you can't take back." Emily didn't even glance at her mother. Her eyes stayed locked on Mark's. "Try me." For the first time, I saw uncertainty break across his face. Not remorse, not yet, but fear of loss. Real loss. The kind he couldn't buy back with another donation or another country club dinner. He slowly lowered the phone, but the damage had already been done. Jake tore free of the groom's men and stood breathing hard, one step from either triumph or disaster. "You just proved exactly why she never belonged in this family," Mark said, meaning me. "No," Emily answered. "You just proved why maybe I don't." That sentence landed harder than anything Jake or I had said all evening. It came from the one person Mark had always assumed was an extension of himself. And because it came from her, it exposed the rot in ways public accusation never could. He looked at his daughter as though he barely recognized her. "You are choosing badly." Emily's chin lifted. "No, I'm choosing clearly." Patricia crossed the floor, lowering her voice into the sharp whisper of women who care more about reputation than damage. "Think about the guests. Think about the press photographer. Think about the donors here. Stop this now." Emily turned to the room and whatever fear remained in her seemed to burn off all at once. "Since everyone is already watching," she said, "then let them watch the truth. My father humiliated the woman who raised the man I love. He tried to control our marriage before it began. And if any of you still think that's class, then maybe all this money has made you morally illiterate." A few guests actually looked ashamed. A few looked offended. A few were already pretending to check their phones, no doubt preparing the polished version of the scandal they would retell later. But the power in the room had changed. Mark felt it. So he did what men like him do when they can't win the room. He withdrew to plan the next attack. "Enjoy your little moral victory," he said coldly. "By tomorrow morning you'll understand that speeches don't protect you from consequences." Then he walked out, not in a burst of rage, in controlled fury, the most dangerous kind. Jake looked as though he wanted to go after him, but Emily caught his arm.